I'm always looking at how can I treat my clients and my community with respect? How can I ensure engaging in practices that are humane? And I'm not playing on the power dynamics, because one of the things that really happens online is you get to know someone without actually knowing them. You start to build this one-sided friendship. It's called a parasocial relationship. And we used to do this with celebrities in magazines and on TV. And now we do this with influencers and creators and business owners. And we start to assign them a lot of value, a lot of weight. We think we have to be like them, or that we have to listen to what they're saying. And we really need to not, if we have any sort of community or audience, make sure that we are not taking advantage of that and really using that power dynamic to our advantage. So I think there's a lot of responsibility, especially for creators, with treating your community with a level of kindness and not manipulating them.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Online Creator Podcast. My name is Kim, your podcast host, business mentor, and audio storyteller. This show is a space to inspire through conversations and community, to help us keep connected, keep inspired, and keep moving towards our goals. Expect to hear honest conversations and real-life experiences from entrepreneurs at every stage of business and from a wide range of industries. Find your confidence, see what is possible, and build the legacy that you have dreamed of. Let's get started. Good morning, Maggie. Thank you so much for being on the podcast this morning. I can't wait to really get into this conversation with you.
I am really excited to be here, Kim, because I have a soft spot for creators, even though I'm not truly a creator. I'm a creator in my heart. And I love talking to other podcasters.
Yes. Yeah. Before we hit record, we were really getting into it because we have a few things in common: stage of life, proximity of where we live, and all those good things. And I do love that you are a fellow podcaster. So I can't wait to get into how you use audio in your world. So before we get started, can you just please introduce yourself, who you are and who you serve?
So I'm Maggie Patterson. I'm a fellow Canadian like Kim, and I run two businesses. I have a content marketing agency where I work with B2B professional services and tech companies. And then I also run BS Free Business, which is really designed for service business owners, in particular consultants and creatives and agency owners, so they can kind of get that BS free advice about how to run your business. I've had my own business for 19 years. I've been, very digitally native. I was building blogs in the, very early days, and I've seen a lot of things. And with my marketing background and communications background, I have some very strong feelings and opinions on how things are happening in the online business world and how it really does pretty much everyone in that industry a lot of disservice. There's a lot of bad advice. It wastes a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy, and a lot of harm is being done. So with BS Free Business, really, I'm there to be like a very grounded, realistic consultant to people to say, no. Stop chasing your 7-figure dream. Come on over here and we're going to figure out what you actually want from your business.
Yeah, because it can look so differently. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken away from a few of the latest conversations I've had, is that it doesn't have to be that certain number. It's just literally, what kind of lifestyle do you actually want to live? And that's what you should be thinking about when putting all the time and energy into building that foundation. So you touched on it a little bit. Okay, first of all, 19 years, seriously?
Yeah.
Doing your own thing?
My
It's
son
huge.
turns 20 in a few days, and I literally just never came back from my maternity leave.
Wow.
to my job, my corporate job. I was like, and no, I'm
cool.
out. I'm going to start a business. And I gave myself 4 months, and I was like, let's see how it goes. And I had a lot of skills going into it. I had a lot of business skills. I had a really good network. So I was very fortunate, but it turned out really well. And the rest is history.
That is so cool. Do you have other entrepreneurs around you in your world that you saw this as being possible, that kind of helped push you and guide you?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. So I grew up in a very, downtown neighborhood in Ottawa, Canada. But what is interesting is I was exposed to so many different types of people. A lot of my friends' parents had their own companies. They were freelancing. They were doing contract work. So I really saw those possibilities, and not even realizing at the time, but I can see that now, that you didn't have to necessarily, here most people work for the federal government. you didn't necessarily have to follow that path. And I actually, right out of school, I did work in the federal government ever so briefly. And I was like, yeah, this is not for me. And so I landed in corporate, but then I was like, I have a small child. I have a long commute. I have a partner who works shift work. I'm like, this isn't going to work for me. So let's see what we can do with this.
That is so crazy. We have so many more similarities. My husband has worked shift work his whole life too, like 25 years. He actually just finished in the fall. He says he doesn't ever want to do a shift work job again in his life, which I totally 100% support because I could see, it affecting his health in so many ways. And on the same hand, it really helped us like be able to build this life together. And the only reason I stayed in the job as long as I did is that I was part-time. So between his shift work and my part-time, we were able to like really juggle the kids and family life, and it just worked. And I didn't have anyone around me that were entrepreneurial. So I thought this is what I needed to do for 25 plus years until I could pull out that pension. Until I realized, well, when COVID happened, like a lot of people, and
Yep.
I kind of looked around, started looking around a little bit deeper into what was possible, and it just blew my mind. So I'm so excited that you took the chance on yourself earlier in life. I think it doesn't matter what stage of life you're in, you can make that happen. So I love that you help other entrepreneurs create that. I recently saw a post when you were on holidays, and I feel like it got a lot of traction. And maybe you could talk about this a little bit more. Speaking exactly about what you just kind of brushed on about what kind of is happening in this online space right now, and it's not even right now, like literally I've seen it for the last few years,
Yeah.
but it's like really rubbing me the wrong way even more so now. And maybe it's just because I'm tired of seeing that, and because I know what else is possible, and if we just kind of flip that script a little bit, what it could look like. Can you talk about your post when you were on holidays just recently or traveling, what you posted and some of the feedback you're getting and your perspective on that?
So we're at this really interesting moment because so many things have converged. A lot of people are like you, like they're just tired of this very typical online business narrative about, you have to, success needs to look this way. It's a certain number. You need to do these really sketchy and scammy marketing tactics. You need to basically strip away the agency from people in the sales process. Like there's not a lot of room to be human. It's very much like follow this playbook. This is how it's done, and this is how you need to be successful. And with my business and marketing background, I'm like, no. And so one of the things that comes up a lot, and I think one of the things that grates on most people and also does a lot of damage to them psychologically, and I wish I was exaggerating, comes down to income claims. So, if I was standing up on Instagram being like, okay, you know what? I made $900,000 last year, whatever the number is. Well, guess what? There's no proof. It's not relevant. There's no disclosure of all the factors that went into that. So one of the posts I shared was basically like, let me tell you how much money I made on vacation. And then I was like, haha, people lied to you on the internet.
Yeah,
And and people are always like, oh my gosh, it's so true. And I think
so true.
what happens is, there's always this constant flow of new people into the industry. And I just want to be a voice for that to say, like, listen, like, you don't have to listen to all this because there's kind of a cycle, right? People are excited, they're very optimistic, then they get burned, and then they're very jaded. And I tend to work with people once they've been burned and they're jaded. And I would like to prevent people from getting jaded at all. I would like them to have some optimism about the excitement of having these opportunities and also not feeling like they have to compromise their values or how they want to run their business.
Yeah, I love that. So, how do you run your business differently than the status quo, like than kind of the loud ones that we are seeing?
Yeah, and I love Kim, you use the word loud because a lot of what we see are the loudest voices, the not even the most competent people. They're good at marketing. It doesn't mean they're good at their thing. And that could be a creator, it could be a service business owner, it could be any number of things. And so we have to look beyond kind of these very obvious examples and be like, okay, how do I want to do this? Just because this person is applying pressure in the sales process doesn't mean I have to do it. So I really try to approach my business grounded in really solid business fundamentals. Like I'm not engaged in magical thinking. I'm not engaged in, hope and a dream. Everything's really brought down to business basics. But, from an emotional point of view, I'm always looking at how can I treat my clients and my community with respect? How can I ensure engaging in practices that are humane? And I'm not playing on the power dynamics, because one of the things that really happens online is you get to know someone without actually knowing them. You start to build this one-sided friendship. It's called a parasocial relationship. And we used to do this with celebrities in magazines and on TV. And now we do this with influencers and creators and business owners. And we start to assign them a lot of value, a lot of weight. We think we have to be like them, or that we have to listen to what they're saying. And we really need to not, if we have any sort of community or audience, make sure that we are not taking advantage of that and really using that power dynamic to our advantage. So I think there's a lot of responsibility, especially for creators, with treating your community with a level of kindness and not manipulating them.
Yeah, I agree to that for sure. And I also think because we all bring our different skill sets to the
Mhm.
table, right? We might not be experts in these areas. I definitely am not in marketing. I've never run a business myself, so I'm still learning as we go. And that's why I find it so fascinating to talk about how others are running their businesses and what it looked like and who are they first reaching out to for help, because that looks different too, with all angles. That it's possible. Like that's the other piece is that you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be able to be a successful and, sought after thought leader or entrepreneur in your own respective space, because we all bring our own special sauce to the table. So I love that. That's how you look at things from a different lens. And I think that's possible for others too, as well. And I think that's the biggest message that we want others to hear, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the things you touched on there is each of us knowing what our skills and experience are and not misrepresenting those, not feeling like we have to fake it till we make it, like being very much in integrity and coming from a place of service and honesty for our community or for our clients, and staying in our own lane. Like if one of my clients says, "Hey, I want to give, what's your take on this accounting thing?" All I can say is, "Here's my experience with this. This doesn't mean I'm an expert. I'm the queen of the disclaimer. I'm constantly like, this is not legal advice. This is not business. Like, you need to check with a qualified professional." And so much of what we see online is a lot of smoke and mirrors, people trying to do something that, and we end up learning from people who actually just learned the thing last week. Right. So we have to be very mindful of that. But the other part is there is so much possibility. And I think that's one of the questions a lot of people ask me. They're like, "You've been very vocal about these things for quite some time. Like, are you like depressed, hostile, angry?" And I'm like, "No, I want people to know how good this is gonna be." Like, I actually care about people being able to have these opportunities. And that's why I talk about these things, because I see so many people get burned. And what they do is they fold up and they're like, "I'm out and I'm going back to my corporate job."
Yeah.
Or and it's, I hate seeing that so much.
I do too. And I keep saying to my husband, if this was easy, everybody would be doing it. But if we could also support each other a little bit differently,
Yes.
as we're all going through this, because I want to see and amplify as many women voices as possible as well. That's why I started this journey, because there's not enough and there needs to be more stories shared and collaborations and partnerships. I mean, that's what lights me up. And you can totally tell when you're talking and reading your posts and seeing you on Instagram, on your stories, like you can tell there's passion there. And that's why people are gravitated towards you. It's the realness, it's the honesty. And yeah, at the end of the day, like that's if we lifted each other up more, we would see more successes. And that's 100% what I want to see as well. I don't want to see like good people folding because they're frustrated and don't know where to turn. Do you have some strategies that someone can, if they're listening in, they can be like, ah, that makes sense. Like, how does someone gain a little traction if they're feeling deflated in the moment?
One of the things I think that is so, so important is to stop taking so much external, I know this is a podcast, so a little ironic, but stop taking so much external advice and really cultivate that self-trust and critical thinking, that you know what your skills are, that you know um, what you're doing. Because when someone has been, there's sometimes tangible harm done, or they're just feeling deflated, it can really become so much bigger than it actually is. And I want to emphasize to anyone who has ever had a bad experience buying a course, working, whatever it might be online. I have too. This happens to most people, unfortunately, because the status quo of how business is done in a lot of ways is very, very toxic. So when you think about what you can be doing, you have influence over your community, you have influence over your clients, you have power and agency. And I always like to remind people that if you can, really tap into what's important to you, what are your values, and align your business with that, and get away from these kind of very external measures of success. What is important to you? One of mine is telling the truth. So like I think about in my business, how I interact with my clients, how I interact online, how am I bringing that through? How am I making sure that everything I'm doing is coming back to that? So getting really clear on not just the values, but like how does that show up in every aspect of your business and in your presence? And also remembering that what we see online is not the truth, but the loud voices that you talked about, that does not denote expertise. The most competent, the most skillful, people that are so excellent at their craft that I know are not the loudest. You're not necessarily going to find them on social media. They don't necessarily have a big platform. Be willing to look further afield and go a little slower so you find the people that are really aligned with you, that really are running their business in a way that you respect and you feel like there's going to be mutual respect and trust there.
Yeah, so let's lean into that. How does someone search those people out? Because I think that's the hard part. I know for myself, when I've been a part of or allowed myself to be a part of a few more networking calls where there's no commitment, it's just a chance to get to know each other. That's where some amazing connections have happened. And it's also being in circles where I know whoever's organizing it, their circles of people are amazing. And that's really, really lifted me and helped me when I've been frustrated or kind of in a dip, in the low valley of the business journey, right? But how do you search out people like that?
So there's really been a few different things. I was very fortunate early on to be in a paid group, and it just honestly was lightning in a bottle. Just really amazing people. But going to what you said of really looking to the person leading that group was not the most popular, not the most prominent, but I watched her for quite some time and I took my time and I got to know her and I built a relationship and I trusted that she would curate the right group of people. And she did consistently. And a lot of those people, like 10, 12 years later, are still people I'm very, very close with. I invest a lot of energy into building online relationships. I have conversations in my DMs. I get to know people. And, I guest on a podcast. I keep in touch with someone. Like taking the time to foster relationships in a really like the same way you would a real life business relationship or friendship. Coming to it from a place of like actual humanity, not just like what can this person do for me. And I think the other thing is too, like if you're seeking out a community, really understanding what the purpose of that community is, what is the shared approach, what are the values underpinning it. And I know a lot of this stuff is not sexy. It requires us to engage the critical thinking. It requires us to be much more move much more methodically. But this is how we prevent ourselves from getting burned and building actual like real lasting relationships. And one thing I do like literally on the sales page for one of my communities is I have it linked like, here are my values. Here is how this shows up. And I tell people, if you want to see our community agreement, you can do that. So if you are considering investing in something and you can't get a handle on those things and they're important to you, don't compromise.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask,
Yeah.
like, for their values or for something a little bit more detailed than just maybe X, Y, and Z join. And a lot of those people that are doing and building communities with integrity, they're allowing you the opportunity to check it out without a massive investment to start up,
Yeah.
right? And I think those are the people that I want to be around with as well. You gave so many important pieces of advice there that are so valuable because I think we also just need to give ourselves a little bit of grace. If it doesn't
Yes.
work out, that's okay. Like take a step back and then it also really depends on what type of business that you have. If you're serving people every day of the week, maybe you shouldn't be. Like maybe you should take a day in the week just for you to be able to be a little bit more inwards, to take time for yourself. Because I know if I don't allow for that, like I'm exhausted because I'm a bit of a ambivert. I imagine I love the socialization, but then I'm also like, I need a moment afterwards to like collect myself and to just have calm and quiet. And I think that's okay. I think it's important to think about who we are as individuals and how we want to be seen and how we want to grow and how we want to keep that spark alive in our business. Because if we don't have the spark and the joy, we will not continue to grow. But it is also so important to surround ourselves with others that are like-minded and thoughtful and approaching business from the same kind of angle, but also there's a diverse group because that's how we grow and that's how we stretch. So many good, nuggets in there and how amazing it is that you have found those people and been able to continue that relationship. Like that's huge.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like anything. Sometimes we're more, we're firing up our Voxer all the time. And sometimes it's like, hey, I haven't heard from you a while. What's going on? You hit on two really important things that I think kind of just bring this part to like a very natural close is, you mentioned being an ambivert. One of the things I see, I'm an introvert. I work with a lot of introverts. I work with a lot of people who are neurodivergent, and understanding your needs on a human level, not just as a business owner, but if you're going to go into a program or a community or work with a coach, making sure there's a match there and that person understands that. And one of my old clients, she posted online a couple weeks ago. She said, I never want to be in a program with a dance party. And I thought, yeah, that's me. And like some people would be like, yeah, that's the best. I'd be like, this is the worst. I don't want to do this. So understanding what's going to work for you and not just going with the crowd because you think, oh, my friends are doing it. Well, if it's not going to work for you, you're not, it's not going to be a great use of your time, energy, and money. The other thing to consider too is the specificity. And you kind of touched on this. And I think it's really important to call out. A lot of what we see in online spaces is these very large communities, these very large programs, what cohorts, whatever. And it's like creators, service business owners, coaches, e-commerce store owners. And yes, there's a time and place for that. But if you want to be having conversations as a creator, you need to be with other creators. So being more specific about what you actually need from that and who are the people you need to be connecting with, because yes, I can forge a relationship with a e-commerce creator, but we don't necessarily have our business problems are probably semi, unique from each other. So I think being very mindful of what it is you actually need is critical.
Yes. So critical, so important. And it changes.
Yeah.
It can change, right? It just depends what stage of business you're in and what you really need to tap into and be mindful of that. So yeah, so many good points there. Workplay is the last branding solution you will ever need. Your Workplay team is your brand photographer, your brand designer, social media manager, and your creative direction bestie. Here to make your Pinterest board dreams a reality with one system, one team, and one flat monthly fee under $500. And no, there's no catch. Your brand is your power. Workplay wants to help you create it fiercely. DM me on Instagram, Workplay, to learn more. Let's talk a little bit about content creation. You use audio in your business. Can you talk a little bit about why first you chose audio as a platform, whether it's a private feed or a public feed, how you use them at the names of your podcast, and what it's done for your business?
So I have been a blogger for previous business ventures. I was very early blogging with a lot of clients. I'm a writer. That's the reason I went into communications and marketing in the first place. So that was a very natural extension. But one of the things I found as I was building my business is I am because I am introverted, I'm very good at hiding behind my words. I'm like, here's my thoughts. Okay, bye. And I want to kind of slink away. So podcasting for me was something that I was like, okay, this is going to push you a little bit and people are going to get to know you. They're going to hear your voice, your excitement, get to know your personality. And that was something I did 10 years ago when I first started my very first podcast. And it has been such a great experience for me in so many ways because number one, it really has let my community and the people in my orbit get to know me. So the experience I have now is I often have people when I like open up a mastermind or something that show up and they're like, "Yeah, I'm ready to work with you. I've listened to like 300 episodes." And I'm like, they know what I'm about. They understand how I approach business. So I'm able to screen the right people in. And like if someone listens to 3 episodes and like, I dislike her immensely, they're not going to stick around. So podcasting has really been helpful for that way. And so right now I have two podcasts. I have one called the BS Free Service Business Show, and that is for creatives and consultants and agency owners. And we really talk about how do you run a service business from a place of not wanting to burn yourself out, taking time away from client work, growing in a really thoughtful and sustainable way. And I also have a podcast I co-host with my friend, Dr. Michelle Mazer, called Duped, The Dark Side of Online Business. And we really do a deep dive from a marketing communications perspective, bringing in a lot of research, understanding like, why do we fall for these things? What can we do about it? What do we need to watch for? And that's really from a place of like consumer advocacy. So saying like, okay, great, there's this certain thing we see happening, income claims or a certain sales tactic. What do you need to know about it? How do you need to think about this from a consumer perspective so you are not sucked into the scam?
Okay, so cool. And you use them so differently.
Yes.
I have so many questions, but like, do you in I imagine you enjoy them both differently for different reasons, right? Like the building advocacy piece and having those really thoughtful conversations must be just so fun. Like I can't even imagine.
Well, that entire podcast, I think we just hit our 3rd anniversary with Duped. And Michelle and I had
Wow.
both been, because we had a very similar background, we'd both been talking about these issues. We'd been friends for a long time. We were on
Mhm.
Voxer all the time, like, quite frankly, bitching about all these things. Like,
Great. Yeah.
like base. And finally we were like, why isn't this conversation just a podcast? Because
So
I
fun.
think people would really like to hear our thinking and understand some of the, psychological tactics that are being used on them. So my favorite thing with that podcast is yes, we have like the best time having the conversations. We get to be funny and
Yeah.
snarky, and we help people feel better about the experiences they might have. But I love it when I get a DM or an email that says, "Hey, I didn't buy this because I remembered this episode." I'm like, "Thank you. My job is done here."
So cool. And how did you know that you wanted to create that one more like behind a privacy kind of like you have to sign up for this? How did that come up?
So Duped is actually public,
Okay,
but
the
then
Duke
we
does.
also have a Patreon.
Okay,
So the public is interesting. One of our policies has been we don't name names because
right.
it is very easy to pile on and say this person did this thing and they're bad. What we
Right.
really want people to do is recognize the tactics, out there in the wild and be able to say, "Oh, that's interesting. I saw that person do it and they did it and they did it."
Right.
So there's some certain things we had to talk around a little bit, and we try to keep it very, for lack of a better word, we try to take the high road and keep it classy.
Yeah.
We did want a place where we could let it hang out a little bit more. We still don't name
Yeah.
names on the Patreon, but it gives us, we do book reviews. Like, we're like, why are we reading books we hate? Let us talk about, like, one of the book reviews I did was Think and Grow Rich. And I was like, why is this guy talking about a haunted baby?
Yeah. Right.
Things that wouldn't necessarily fit in the main feed. And
Yeah.
that's been a really interesting experience from a creator point of view because I don't consider myself a creator, even though I do a lot of content creation. That's what my agency does. And but it has basically funded our production costs. And
Oh, so
as I told someone, I'm not getting rich. I got $34 after we paid all our expenses last month. So it's not
yeah.
exactly lucrative, but I'm very grateful that we have that extra line of communication with our audience and that we're able to, have a little more fun with something we're already enjoying doing.
Yeah. And I also think it's really important for people to hear what is possible with audio too. It doesn't just have
Yes.
to be because podcasting, I'm a firm believer, podcasting isn't for everyone, but audio can be in so many different ways in your business, however you're structuring it. I mean, we build so many businesses on this like one-on-one attention, but we value our time too as coaches or mentors and all that good stuff. There are ways that you can use private audio feeds to be able to build into your coaching business or your mentoring business that still
Yes.
gives that high level touch without you having to be present 24/7. And you know what, frankly, I think we're all getting tired of all the scheduling. I don't want to be completely so scheduled. If I was, I'd be, at my last job that I was in for 20 years. I actually just talked to my coworker about a week ago because we still are connected and I still think so much of her. I think she has like 20 some meetings in the last 3 weeks. And I'm like, but
Yeah.
what are all these meetings about? At the end of the day, like that's not what we want. That's not why we're creating this. So audio can be used in so many different cool ways. And behind a Patreon wall is just another example of you can do something different, unique, create that like buzz and feed and give somebody else or your listeners a little extra, right?
And like, I love private audio feeds. It's not just
Yeah,
the Patreon. Like, all of my
me
programs
too.
have a private audio feed. So if they can't
Love
show
that.
up, I'm literally like, post the question in the Slack and we'll answer it on the call live for you.
Yeah.
Um, no one feels like they're missing things. Scheduling happens, life happens.
Um,
I don't have any expectation everyone's going to show up. I also created for them because we were there's a lot of questions about, oh, what are you doing for your marketing? I noticed you're doing this differently. So I just created
yeah,
like a really raw, there's no editing marketing debrief for all of our people across our 3 groups. And just, I'm like, here's what's happening. Here's the numbers. Not stuff I would necessarily get into publicly, but in that community. And like, they've loved that experience.
yeah.
I've literally taken like little mini series I want to create, and I
Uh,
create a private feed, and I'm like, here's why I think a lot of the traditional planning advice is bullshit. Here we go.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
so,
Well, yeah.
really, there's so many possibilities, and I feel like audio is so accessible for most people. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, people who are hearing impaired, there's a different thing. Please
for
provide
sure.
a transcript. I'm really big on
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I drove to the gym this morning, listened to a podcast. I did my warm up with a podcast. Then I listened to music. Then I listened to a podcast on the way home.
Love
I
it.
came home and like cleaned up my kitchen and ate my breakfast, listened to another podcast. Like, I would not ever consume content in the way I do if I didn't have podcasts.
Absolutely. It's just such a great and amazing tool to be able to learn on the go. And I mean, I'm constantly like speeding it up so I can get through something if I'm really interested and I can slow it down or press pause if I want to write something down. Like there's just so many cool ways for us to learn on the go, right? And most of us are usually doing more than one thing. Like we have to if we want to get things accomplished in our day, in our week. And I'm not saying like try to, multitask all the time because it's important to slow down too, but it is such a cool tool.
Well, I mean, a great example is gardening. I'm in gardening season. I listen to fun pop culture podcasts when I'm gardening. It just makes the whole experience that much more. I love gardening. I love podcasts. Now it's even better. All I need
Yeah.
is like a good snack.
Right? I know yesterday, I think I was like chopping up some veggies and I was like, and that can be a little like monotonous because you're like peeling carrots and whatever. And I'm like, wait a sec, I'm missing something. What's missing? Oh, right, my headphone. Because I was like, just wait a sec here. There's a moment where I'm going to be stuck here. And that's not a bad thing, but like, what else can I like listen to spice it up? So I love that. There's so
And
many great
the
ways.
perfect example of this is I have 2 friends. We're in our writing group together, and they blew my mind when they told me when they buy a book, they also buy the audiobook so that they can seamlessly switch through them. So like they will be reading at night, then, drive the kids to school in the morning, listen to some of the book. I was like, that is amazing. They would never be able to read as much as they do without having that alternative format. And I think thinking about the people we want to reach in our business and how can we make our ideas more bite-sized? How can we make it more consumable? How can we make it more convenient? And how can we meet people in a format that works for them? Not everyone wants to read a
Yes.
blog. Not everyone wants to listen to a podcast. So I basically have both. And I'm like, I got you covered.
Yes. I love that. My first audiobook that I bought too, because I love having a book. But I also love to listen, was Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights. And I mean, come on, like with his voice, this is like so cool. And again, it goes back to the idea of when I listen to somebody new, I know I'm invested right away or I'm not, because
Yeah.
I can just tell, like, I just, you can feel so many of the story's emotions and how the, reader is just invested or not invested. And that matters when I'm listening and I'm, taking in all the good information. So many great tidbits there. If people want to know more about you, Maggie, where do people find you? What's the best way to get into your world
So
besides the
that,
podcast? Because there's so many
yeah.
cool podcasts. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So many podcasts. And I think I might be creating another one. I'm
Oh my God,
Stay
I love
tuned,
it.
everybody.
I love it. I love
I
it.
have my name is Maggie and I have a podcast problem.
It's good. It's good. I love it.
And just full transparency, I did talk about this in a recent episode of the BS Free Service Business Show. Like, I consider myself the talent. Like, I write the episode, I record the episode, and then I do nothing with it. So if you are doing it all yourself, please do not hold yourself to the standard of, wow, that Maggie has a lot of podcasts, because
It's a lot of
I
work.
have a team. I
Yeah.
have help. And I
Yeah.
always have with the podcast, because otherwise there would be no podcast if I had
Did
to
you know
edit my.
that? Sorry, I'm totally going to interrupt, but did you know that right away? Or did you have to figure that out?
No, I knew from day one. So in a previous business, I did a lot of YouTube, and
Okay.
I
Oh,
cannot stand editing audio or video. It's
so much
like
work.
the kryptonite. I have ADHD. It is boring and I don't like it. Like,
Yeah.
the end. So I have had the same audio editor for over 10
Awesome.
years. And I pray he never leaves me,
Right?
because
It
yeah, like
matters.
I'm just like, we're good, right? Please don't leave.
Yeah. But it's good that you identified that right away, because I think that's what holds a lot of people back. It's either, and again, like, I just want to stress the importance of, it depends how you want it produced, right? You can have a heavily produced episode or you can have a lightly produced episode, but you can clean it up in different ways. It
Yes.
doesn't cost like so much money, at least to get your foot in the door and play with it and have fun with it first. Yeah.
And like, just shout out, when I started, we didn't have the tools we have now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's so much, like,
So
I
true.
had to make a little clip edit on something, and I use Riverside for recording. I was able to just go in the transcript and go, boop, take that out. I might have edited my own show 10 years ago if I'd had that.
It's
Who
pretty
knows?
cool. Yeah. It's pretty cool. Okay. So let's go back. How do people find you?
The best place is bsfreebusiness.com. I also hang out on Instagram and Threads at bsfreebusiness, and the podcasts are all the major places on the internet. So, and I'm very active in my DMs. So if you have a question or something you're like, ooh, that's interesting, I'm happy to chat with you more about it.
I love the conversation. Before I let you go, I love always ending with a reflective question. You've been in the business for a long time. What does success mean to you now? How does that look? And has there been anything instrumental to keep that level of success kind of flowing in your world?
So for me, it really comes down to autonomy over my schedule. Yes, I have to make money and pay the bills, and I got a kid in university, but but at the end of the day, like, that is the measure of success. For me, is how much autonomy do I have over my schedule? And before we got started, Kim and I were talking about lake season in Canada, like being able to peace out and go to the lake. I don't work Fridays. All of that to me is great. Not having to sit down at my desk till 11 a.m. to be able to go to the gym or chop veggies or garden or go for a walk with a friend. Like, that to me it's about quality of life at the end of the day. Like, I started a business so that my life would be a certain way. And that's really the point at the end of the day.
That's so great. And is there anything instrumental that has helped you, whether it's the supports? I know you mentioned that earlier in the show, like the people around you. Is it platforms that have helped you get there?
Ooh.
Is it like what, support system has helped you?
So there's really three things for me. Is starting my business, I had a lot of support from my husband. He has a very traditional job. He has benefits. He has all these things. And overall, my family was super supportive. And I know people don't have that. The other thing is the ongoing relationships I have with people. As much as I am introverted and awkward at times, I am very much a people person. So being able to pick up Voxer or send someone a DM and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? So if you don't have those relationships, fostering those relationships with people who will tell you the truth. I think that's the important part. Not just like Hype Squad. Like, Hype Squad's good, but you also need the truth tellers to be like, you know what, that's actually a terrible idea, and I'm going to challenge you on that. Let's have that conversation. And then the final thing is being very, very thoughtful about how I want to manage my money. I am very, I'm not going to say frugal because I'm not, but I'm very strategic in my budgeting and understanding what types of support I need at different times. And that is something I see so many people struggling with. We have this idea that we're missing something. And what I have found is we are not necessarily missing something. We need to do a better job of really drilling down on like, what is the need I am trying to fill? It's the same thing when you're like in a store, you're like, oh, I think I need a new sweater. We do that in our business. And I think learning to not be additive in that way has allowed me to make a lot of choices in my business that I don't think I would have otherwise, because I would just be spending money and then just trying to earn more money. Like I'm off that hamster wheel, and that has been really helpful.
Do you, one final question, sorry, I'm just so curious. Do you keep yourself accountable like monthly? How do you do that? Because it's
Oh,
so difficult. It's so difficult to 100%, like you just said,
it
to
is
pursue that new shiny
so,
thing and be like, oh, can I follow this path for a little while and then get veered off because there's so many cool things out there. Like, how do you keep on
yes.
track?
So there's two things. I have a bookkeeper, and that is I have always had a podcast editor. I've always had a bookkeeper. Money is not my natural state. I've come a long way, but it does not come easily or instinctively to me. So having someone who can be that thought partner that holds me to account. So I work with her on the budget, and she like puts it up there, literally for me. And she's like, you overspent on this. So what goes through my mind is her name. I think, oh, I don't want to have that conversation. And yet, yes, at the end of the day, it's my business is money, but that often stops me from things. The other part of it is that in that budget, like I allocate out very specifically, like here's what I'm going to spend on events. Here's what I'm going to spend on coaches or consulting. Here's what I'm going to spend on skills development. And I stick to that budget. So if I know, let's say I was like, okay, I have $2,000 for the year, every investment I make, I think, do we actually need that? Or are we just feeling like we just need a little something? So, I try to have a plan to go with that, to say, here's how I'm going to spend the money. It might change during the year, but instead of just being in reactive mode, being like, yeah, I think I want to learn about that project management system. Why? You don't even use that project management system. It's a shiny object, and I don't want my bookkeeper to challenge me on it later. And so every month I'm being told what I'm doing well and what I'm not doing so well on. And it's confronting. I feel sometimes about it.
No, I think that's such a valid point, and a lot of us have to remember what our skill sets are when we are running our
Mhm.
business, and that at the end of the day, we are running a business.
Yes.
So, being really strict with ourselves on that a little bit, because if we aren't knowing what our numbers are and being accountable, we're not going to be here in 6 months. And again, we started the conversation with we want to be as sustainable as possible. Most of us are starting this and doing all of this hard work, all those late hours when we're first starting out or through the seasons of our business, and not just for fun. We're doing them for a reason and a purpose. And whatever your purpose is, let's keep that burning alive and let's keep it joyful. Let's keep that spark going and let's keep lifting each other up. So many good points in there. I love the truth teller thing. I've wrote down a couple of nuggets for myself because I think, yeah, it's so important to be around others that are not just telling us. We have friends like that in our life, right? Friends that are like, the ones that tell us really truly how that new hairstyle looks or that dress that we're
I
getting
am that
with
friend.
party time, right? And it hurts, but it's so necessary because I tend to be the one that makes people around me feel like, like I always try to see the positive, but
Yes.
yet we need a little bit of that hard truth sometimes too, especially while we're going through life and business. So
Yeah.
I
And
appreciate your
everyone
time
get
so much.
yourself the hard truth bookkeeper. Like, be
Yes.
like,
Yes.
bookkeeper, are you going to challenge me? Yes, you're hired.
Yeah, no, yeah. She's like actually literally my number one hire will be that. And I've identified that in just the last like probably 4 weeks of my business. And I've been doing this for 3.5 years. So yeah, it's time. It's time for me to get into that truth. Get into the truth. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed this conversation so much. And I know that others will take some goodness from it and will search out for more from you. Again, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the Online Creator Podcast. If you haven't subscribed to the show yet, please do so on your favorite media player. And come check us out over on YouTube, where you have full access to our episodes on video there. You can check out the important links mentioned in today's episode in the show notes, and please join the conversation over on Instagram at May and James Co. I'll see you next week.